Thank you, Liz. And look, thanks to the Ice House for everything you are doing for New Zealand and our businesses everywhere. And I understand that, you don't even have to be alum to come on these webinars, which is absolutely marvellous. So hello, you. Now, many of you are alum, so I'm anticipating that you have seen this face, this one here, before. Those of you who I have not met, I'm not going to go into some great lengthy kind of intro, but I can tell you that having worked with like tens of thousands of human beings in this country and in Australia, there are some patterns that kind of show up around communication and our relationships and communication. And I want to remind you really today of things. I'm sure I have absolutely nothing particularly new to offer, but perhaps these tips, and hopefully you've got the file, you've either printed it out or you've got access to it on another screen so you can follow through with me, or you're going to have a replay of this webinar anyway, and there's this resource plus some other resources on a dedicated web page that I've set up for you, but we'll tell you more about that in a little bit. For now, I just want to say my heart goes out, because whether your business is thriving in this environment, given that you may be in essential services, we know that there is fear associated with that, literal life and death kind of fear. So when fear comes up, consciousness goes down and we lose our capacity to think clearly and make good, wise decisions, and we can lose our rag and relationship can break down and all the rest of it. So communicating in a crisis time is really, really mission critical to how we might come out the other end. Some businesses have evaporated completely overnight. Mine's one of them. Well, not completely evaporated, because here I am talking to you, but generally the consultancy business, it's a no-go. We have to pivot, we have to get creative, and of all things, I really want to encourage you that we need to imagine our way out of this. We haven't even seen what a lot of the consequences are going to be. So we're in brand new territory. And as an ex-police officer, I've been reflecting on, have I ever, I know we've had no situation like this, but when has there had to be a mind shift challenge like this? And the last time I remember it was answering a 111 call in the New Zealand Police control room in Auckland, and someone said there'd been an explosion on a boat down at Marsden Wharf, and that was of course many years ago when the Rainbow Warrior got bombed before it was due to go up and protest nuclear testing up in the Pacific Islands. And I was probably the only paid up member of Greenpeace at the time. My whole entire fleet of colleagues just thought this was something, someone's had an explosion on a boat. I suspected it was sabotage. I was laughed virtually out of the control room, and a colleague and I ran that operation for the first 12 hours as we got our head around, not just as a police force, but as a public, that we had had this experience. It takes a lot to get your head around it. So part of what I want to encourage you to do is keep imagining your way out of it. There are various scenarios we can look at. We get it contained and we carry on, and it's all different anyway because we have to keep our borders closed. We're closed for 2 years, who knows how long. Those what if questions are really useful to start playing with. And keep a journal of your dreams, your insights, your intuitions, and of course we want to focus in right now on communication. So I'm going to jump into that. What I basically want to do is, you're perfectly capable of reading, so you can go through and read these, but there's a few little bits that I want to expand on in here just to foster some insight. If you have worked with me before, you know my bag is conscious evolution, deliberately evolving our organisations. Now, we can do that by choice, or we can be forced to do that by crisis, and that's where we're being led right now. We have to. There's no sticking our head in the sand. We have to get to grips and move forward with this, or we sink. So there's going to be a lot of creative juices flowing. I look forward to the good stuff that comes out of that, and my heart goes out to all of those who are suffering, because there's a hell of a lot of suffering around. I've got contacts in health, the police, domestics, that's all the cops are going to, family harm incidents are up, and we're dealing with this whole global species crisis. So let me get into this. Liz is going to, or someone's going to jump in if you have questions, and you can just interrupt me as we go along. But I really encourage you to jot down any notes or insights that come to you, because they might not be useful now, but they might be useful later. So let's see. Now, I've been inquiring with quite a few CEs and GMs around the place and finding out, and staff and organisations, just taking the pulse around what's working, what's not working in terms of crisis, as well as doing some research with the likes of McKinsey and people like that who are putting out some really, really good stuff. And the principles that seem to apply most in this situation right now anyway, as we manage the crisis and get through that bit, we can't jump ahead to where we're not yet. So at the moment, we're hopefully in response mode rather than reacting. I'm just going to put this up here, because if you've worked with me in the owner manager, program or the LDP program, you will have seen this. Event plus response equals outcome. And, you know, once again, reminder, we're actually only as good as our response. So being resourced on the inside can be really, really helpful for that. We want to increase our response ability. Now, those of you who remember the triune brain model, where, you know, like people's reptilian brain is hugely activated at the moment. So out of the fear response comes different behavior. If you can manage yourself, and I know some of you will have been on the resilience webinar this morning, if you can manage yourself and your internal state, then you can be having a whole brain response considered based on facts, not scaremongering, being completely transparent, and being willing to say when you don't know. I can't tell you how many times I'm talking to staff where there's not enough communication coming through. You talk to a leader and they say, well, I haven't got anything to tell people. There's no change. Tell people, I haven't got anything to tell you. There's no change. Because imagine sitting there in the silence, the deafening silence, and wondering what's going on. Even being told, I've got to report, there's nothing to report, re-empowers a person again. They're not sitting there powerless and helpless, feeling like there's stuff going on that they don't know. So I really encourage you to go for the video option. Texting seems to be working really, really well. People are bombarded with information about the virus, information about where it came from, information about what we need to do next. You need to cut through and get what are the relevant facts and give your teams ways to connect with those, if that's a web page or whatever. So in principle, I really encourage you to, and look, everyone's business is different, everyone's size of business is different, everyone's situation is unique, but if you can, communicate every day, at least once a day with your whole team, maybe by a video, short video message, maybe by text, but keep that communication going, because we're now moving out of the novelty of lockdown, and I don't mean that in a positive way, but the novelty of, and people getting their heads around lockdown, and now we're in for, this is going to be endurance. So if we knew we were good at sprinting, we now have to become experts at the marathon and do what we can as we go through. So the second principle, and I'm not going to read through this whole document, don't worry. The second principle though is to keep it real, and that means you have to. We don't have to do anything, but for your teams, it's really useful for you to be willing to be vulnerable. You know, this is a scary, scary time. We have to invent the future. We have to imagine our way out of it. So you being able to share that vulnerability with your team is a really genuine emotional connector, and that's what people need. And even touching base if you've had to lay people off, could you give them a support call or touch base with them in some way so that the goodwill is continuing as tough as this is. So keep it reassuring, keep it simple, less words, you know, just stick to the facts, and be aware that people are suffering total overwhelm with the amount of information that they're having to digest at the moment. The third principle is just reminding you about this. We're only, now that's all backwards for you. What do I have to do to change that round? Can you see that backwards or forwards, Liz? Just checking my flip chart.
So we're seeing it forward. So we're seeing the way it should be.
So to me, it's a mirror image. I was going to say it's wonderfully metaphoric of the whole bloody situation, isn't it? The whole world's not turned upside down. It's turned back to front. Excuse me. So the usuals in terms of focusing on what you can control, you may notice that your own mental health needs to be really, really taken care of at this time, because all your communication comes out of what kind of state, what kind of internal state that you are in. So self-management, I'll get to that in a little minute. It's probably been covered a lot in the resilience webinar. I didn't see that webinar, but I'm imagining absolutely. So have you got a task force organised already? Chances are you've either convened that little task force, a COVID task force within your organisation, or you're in the process of doing that. Please don't just have that as only senior staff. Make sure you've got voices from all over your business in there, because ideas will come from anywhere. And I'd really encourage you to create some way that members of your teams can get ideas to you as decision makers. And you know, you're gonna have to focus on it's not going to be business as usual when this is over. That's one thing that we've got to get our head around. There's going to be a new normal. We just don't know what it looks like yet, and we can plan and plan and plan, and the best laid plans may have to be thrown up in the air. So, you know, if you've done my session and any of the Icehouse sessions, you'll know keyword flexibility, flexibility, and flexibility. Our challenge now is to adapt, respond rather than just react, and have wisdom in our decision-making processes, looking forward to possible consequences. So we can only do what we can do. So focus on the things you can and do your best to let go of the rest. I really encourage you, this is something that's come from a lot of other businesses too, to remember to use the language of we a lot. There's no you and me right now. We are all in this together. I'm calling this the Great Kiwi Teamwork Challenge. We work together. We get to a place, we look from there, we carry on, you have your input, you do what you can. You may or may not be familiar with framing. I'm going to anticipate that you are, but remember, framing creates relevance. Framing creates context. So think very, very carefully about how you are framing your communications. And on the dedicated web page that I've set up for you, I've put both my books. Normally I only talk about I Can Speak Clearly Now the Pain Has Gone. That's got a chapter on framing and reframing. How can we reframe our business to move forward? Where's the upside potential? And if you're seeking to serve, you're going to find places that you can be of service, no matter what sort of business you've got, because community needs us right now. And this is where we can pull together. It's very obvious to me that people want to help, and they know they're helping by staying home where possible. Essential services obviously can't do that, but Staying home is one thing. While you're home, people want to help. So if you can let your teams get organised in ways where they could be contributing locally in community, if you are a nationwide business, if you're located in one posse, maybe you can do that in a little bit more intensive way. There are lots and lots of ways that we can support in community. There are little community Facebook pages and things that are being set up, and your advice in the mix as a business leader, I'm sure, would be well received by others who don't have the experience and knowledge and skills that you have. Lots of ways that we can contribute. So get your thinking cap on about how you could do that. And hopefully you've already organised ways for your teams to stay in touch with each other. Thank God for technology at this time that we can actually do that. Where are we? If you don't have time to stay abreast of all the facts as they're coming out, new updates every day, etc., make sure that you've got someone whose job it is to do that and feed that through from you. Someone who can filter out any bullshit or conspiracy theories and all the rest of it. Just get armed with the facts and keep passing those on, or give your staff ways that they can connect with that information. Now, I'm sure you're all doing this already, but hopefully you can go through and go, yep, doing that, and that's a good thing. As far as decision making is concerned, I want to give you just another quickie. Sometimes I do this in the Icehouse program, sometimes not, but let's just have a look. I'll just see if I can get my mic to come over here a little bit further. But if you think of the idea, and this is just conceptually for all of us right now, we've got a comfort zone, and in that comfort zone is everything we've ever learned. All our competencies are in here, and oftentimes the movement out of the comfort zone is, you know, we've got different labels for that. You reach the edge of yourself, your business is challenged in some way, you're personally challenged in some way, and there are feelings that come up associated with that. For some people, it's fear. Fear of the unknown. Off the chart we are into the unknown right now. Now, I reframe for that unknown because moving into the unknown is scary, it's risky. We don't know what the consequences will be. We don't know how we'll cope, etc., etc. One thing that I want to offer you is that it's a reframe really to call what's outside of our comfort zone a learning zone. And that way, if you can get your head around, well, that's all right then, because I'm a learner, I'm willing to learn, I back myself as an intelligent person, I can do this, then moving into the learning zone is not quite so psychologically loaded. Understanding our own psychology is really, really helpful right now, because what happens, and this is a dopey, you know, two-dimensional kind of way to try and describe it, but it's only on the edge of ourselves that learning really occurs. And this is where change is occurring. So in terms of leading people through change, to have a psychological understanding, we have not elected voluntarily to walk out of our comfort zone into a global crisis of dealing with COVID-19. We have been thrown out of our comfort zone by the environment, and now it's up to us to respond how we go through. So you will start noticing your own relationship with this whole dynamic. And the more that you can take care of you, this could be the biggest personal growth time in your entire life. And the more you can do that, the more you can support people to lead through. Stress, pressure, learning, change, they all come up at the edge of ourselves. What's out here, we haven't invented yet. So basically, the model goes, we have choice, or like a bank account of choices in our comfort zone, to grow those, to be even better at responding, to be nimble, to be flexible, to move forward. We got to get out of our comfort zone. And there's no got to get out of it, we're out of it. a whole species is out of it. And this is going to take a long time. That's another thing to get your head around. There's no, oh, we'll be out in a month and back to normal. Back to normal, no, forward to a new normal, that has to be invented yet. And it'll have some of the old in it, and hopefully it'll have some new resets where we can even be more in tune with our wider environment. But that's a whole other story, isn't it? So where was I at now? Yeah, there'll be trade-offs, and priorities are going to be competing with each other. My encouragement to you, put your values first. Really walk your talk around your organisation's values. If you're a values-based business, this is the time to really lean in and put the humanity ahead of the other things that might be competing, because other things will fall in behind that if we take care of ourselves and our people first. So I really, really encourage that. Now, I mentioned that I've put my Superpowers book up on the website. That is a context for conscious evolution, and it addresses 5 human powers that we can activate to maturity. And those powers, you know them already. There's awareness. Notice what you notice. There is intuition. And I really encourage you to tune into your intuition right now, because when we're in the learning zone, you have an internal guidance system. I know this might sound a bit woo. It's not. It's practical, and you can open yourself to it and allow it to inform what's going on. Another superpower you have is imagination. That we're really going to need. You've got the power of reason, the way to make meaning of your experience in the world. And we really need to be disciplined, mental discipline, to make meaning that lifts us up rather than pulls us down. And that's what framing's all about. And of course, you've got willpower, the power to take action. Now, I'm not going to go into that anymore here, but for a context, if you're stuck at home and you're looking for something to read, perhaps that might have some things in it that you can dip out in and out of as a bit of a mind expander to help you digest what might be the implications of this going forward. So I really encourage you to ask what if a lot. What if? Let the most outrageous what ifs come into your consciousness, and follow them and have a play with them. Some of them will be dead ends. Some of them might bring up the next brilliant initiative or innovation that's going to re-energize your business when we get through the gritty part of this that we're in the immediate crisis of. If you can, do thought experiments. Einstein did these all the time, and that's asking yourself those what if questions. Ask them in your team, sure. Also ask them of yourself, and do thought experiments. What if this happened? What if that happened? What would I do? How would I go? So that you can you acclimatize your psychology to not potentially be as shocked if new facts arise, and you've already kind of at least had a little bit of a mental and emotional play with those ideas before they actually happen. Just to, you don't have to pick them up and worry they'll stick to you. Just have a look. Help your people as best you can. Well, I'm sure you're doing all of that as well. And make sure you're not the only person who can communicate with your whole team. If you've got a large nationwide organisation, for example, you may be called away to do other things. Have a surrogate that speaks on your behalf, that is a trusted person who can handle that comms if you need to be doing other things. Now, the old fear response, you might notice or might have noticed that your own fear response has been activated and your responses to fear have been activated. Be aware that it's very easy to get triggered by other people's fear. Point blank refusing to do things, or they're frightened of consequences, or, there's a million different scenarios. But the more that you can stay, I guess, in one way, stay in the helicopter, keeping an overview without losing touch with the ground, because your empathy is really important now. Your emotional intelligence is really important now, especially as it comes to managing self, because every one of your communications comes from a place inside you. And if you're attempting to do it because someone said, oh, you need to, say this today, or you need to do that today, it's not about that. It's about the attitudinal shift that allows your communication to come from a place, hopefully, of compassion, kindness, and wisdom. I'm very big at the present on encouraging wisdom-based decision-making. And to me, wisdom is defined by the application of your intelligence and your compassion, both together applied. And if you put that in the mix with your decision-making processes, and also let your staff know what is the decision-making process, communicate these things widely. Keyword, transparency, transparency, transparency. Now, we move into, that's about it for the right now, for the just your general kind of comms things. I'm going to take a pause and just see, Liz, if you've got any questions that are arising from the group that you want to throw in the pot before I move into the personal side of it. So go for your life.
Amanda, I think it's probably worth, and for many of the alumni on the call, they'll know the concept of framing, but never hurts to repeat it. Just a bit more context around what you mean by that.
Okay. So the principle involved, and thanks for that, is if you don't frame it, they will. That's the principle here. So as I say, framing it's not an invention, it is a description of what you will be doing anyway when you are attempting to have another person or a group of people understand you. So it's positioning, in political terms, you might call it spin. What we're talking about here is you thinking beforehand, what is the brain in the audience, whether it's one person or tons of people, what might they be making up? Because framing creates your listener making up what you intend them to make up if you do it well, rather than just leaving the brain to make it up all by themselves. Now, there is a chapter in the book around this. If you were wondering, I think I've heard this before, but I'm not sure. Remember your handout about the washing machine instructions? And if you haven't seen that, it's basically a set of washing machine instructions that just goes, do this, do that, but it's not identified as washing machine instructions. So when we take the information in, our brain is a meaning maker. That's one of our superpowers, the power of reason. And we will make meaning based on our own patterns. So if you want to make sure that your people are making meaning that you intend them to make, it's all in the framing. One frame we're having as a nation is, we are all in this together. There is no separate person that can just go, well, this is not my issue. We are in this together. That's a frame. From that, other things can come in. Reframing is about taking a situation, and the situation itself doesn't change, but we reframe it. And a classic I usually talk about in those programs you've done with me is that, historically, New Zealand, bottom of the world, the problem, isolation, as far as exports are concerned and all of that sort of stuff. In an age of COVID-19, what's the upside to being an isolated little country at the bottom of the planet? There's actually quite a few. And we're going to be building an internalised economy for a wee while yet, by the sounds. And a lot more Kiwis are going to see, that old saying, don't leave town till you've seen the country. I think New Zealand tourism is going to be having a whole lot of creativity and innovation for Kiwis off the back end of this. It's so huge what's happened to that industry and many others. Big changes. Is there anything else there, Liz?
There's a question now. I don't know what you're going to come to next, but there is a question, and maybe we'll hold it. You tell me if we need to hold it to the end, but what are the common mistakes you see in terms of communication in situations like this?
Well, number one, there is no situation like this, so it's all new. But in terms of my feedback that I've been hearing around the traps, most businesses and organisations in the health sector and all across, because my clients are in many different contexts and many different sectors, education, across the board, all of what you guys are doing. And it seems if there's any lack, it would be in the not communicating enough. This is the moment, guys, when you cannot over communicate. We do the 4 questions. What are your frustrations about communication? Too much. You cannot communicate too much at this time. Just make sure it's relevant and it's on point and it's factual and it's not speculative and it's transparent. So that would be the main one. Mostly it seems like New Zealand businesses, we're a highly adaptable people. We're very, very good at turning on a dime. And yes, this is forcing us to do that, but we're going to have a whole new generation of capacity to be flexible enough to make shifts that we need to make. So keep the communication frequent, at least daily with your teams, at least daily, and make sure your little COVID task force is meeting frequently, 2-3 times a day. Some people are doing that because things are moving that fast. Anything else there, Liz?
There are, but let's keep going, given we don't want to run out of time. So carry on,
okay. So I'm only going to whip through the personal. We're actually pretty much looking at my kitchen clock, ready to knock off. But your general health is and your mental health, very, very important to be taking care of yourself. I'm gonna assume that your resilience session kind of handled that. The best thing you can do, and find someone trusted to talk to about this if you feel, I just cannot get my head around this. This is too bloody big. It tends to, the brain will shut down and overwhelm, and then we can't take things in. We can't digest them. So if you need a safe pair of ears to do that with, the Ice House has got a raft of people who, and I'm one of them, who you can contact to have a chat just for you. If you need a download space, if you feel like you're losing the plot, yes, be vulnerable with your team, and there's a balance for you to take care of yourself so that you can be there for all of your team and keep them on track. But you don't have to do everything. This is not your whole burden to bear. If ever there was a time where we're distributing leadership, you don't know where the leaders are going to come from in your organisation right now. They might pop out of nowhere because they're those people that are good to have around in a crisis. And those are the people that, thankfully, I had 7 years in the COPs to acclimatise me to working through crisis. Nothing like this, but I'm not feeling fear. I feel like there's a plan, we stick to the plan, and that is very, very comforting going forward. Look after yourself. The choosing an online platform to learn, just do it. Like video is not my favorite way of expressing myself. I'd far rather be in a live workshop, but we've got to just step past those things. Your self-consciousness is so irrelevant right now. So just put yourself out there, learn to use Zoom. It seems to be a really good one. You're probably using it already, Skype, all the rest of it. And I've just got some other things in here, like build in some fun. If you can find some hilarity in the darkness, you will lift people up. It does not take away from, we are taking this seriously. But if you don't have defrag, ways to lighten, let off the pressure, whatever it is, however it is in the culture of your company that you do that, please make sure that you've got somebody who's good at that to set that up for you. And respond very quickly. As quickly as you can, respond on the other flip chart. Don't react, but just respond. And be aware that the pastoral aspect of leadership is up now. So if you've been the invisible man or woman in your organisation and someone saw over there and didn't really know you, this is the time to show your stripes. This is the time to, as I said before, this may be the biggest leadership growth moment you ever have in your life. My encouragement is cooperate with that. That's a personal growth issue. It's my bag. I'm very, very happy to do whatever I can to support you with that process. But I'm picking, if you're open to it, the Superpowers book will help you with that expansion. We're going to make more room. We have to grow capacity and skills and competence in that new space. You've already been encouraged to meditate, as far as I know, and bottom line, I just want to encourage, we've talked, Liz and Eleanor and I, about how we can run more of these if you need them. It'll no doubt get based on need. But I really wish you well through this turbulent, we're only coming into the rapids. There's a hell of a lot more to go till we get through to some calmer waters. And it's all hands to the pump. All paddles going in the waka. Believe that we will get through this, because we will. We absolutely will. What it'll look like out the other end, what will our new comfort zone become, who knows? But we could turn it into some massive adventure and take the opportunity to do some resets that perhaps our whole species is being called to do.